Hello and welcome to Learning Rewired, the podcast brought to you by Headspring. If you're not familiar with Headspring, we are the learning and development arm of IE Business School in partnership with the Financial Times. In this podcast, we explore the future of work, leadership, and learning in a rapidly changing world. I'm Tiago Kivin. Today I have here at the Financial Times studios, Andy Lopata, a global expert in leadership, professional relationships, and mentoring. Andy has over 20 years of experience helping leaders develop stronger networks and leverage mentoring to drive success worldwide. He is also the co-author of the Financial Times Guide to Mentoring, a guide that helps executives mentor future talent while accelerating their own career progress. In this episode, we'll dive into the power of professional relationships and how building stronger and more intentional connections can deliver measurable results across organizations. Andy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Tiago. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Andy, I want to jump straight in. There's a very famous saying that goes around social media that if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. How much of this is true? And second, how important is relationships for leaders?
Well, it's 100% true. I think it makes sense to probably anyone who's listening to this podcast. The fact is that whatever you are trying to achieve, you will have certain experience, certain expertise, certain skill sets, certain contacts that will help you get there. But if you try and rely only on your skill set, your expertise, you're going to have limitations. You're going to have blind spots. So you need other people that complement your strengths and can help you to find the right way through, find the pathway through of least resistance. So that's why networks, strong relationships are so important. In terms of professional relationships for leaders, they're absolutely essential. You know, we traditionally, we have, I think, a bit of a problem in Western culture where we look for strong leaders and we determine that strong leaders are a certain type. They fit a certain model, and it's the leading from above, the certainty, the knowledge. And that, I think, is really limiting and very damaging. It leads to poor leadership. We need a shift in that model, a shift in that understanding of what leadership is, and understand that we need to lead from among, not from above. Great leaders aren't people who have all the answers. They're people who curate the answers by surrounding themselves with other people who can help them find the right direction, but then lead with certainty once they determine actually that's the right path forward, having talked about it with other people. We're also moving into a world where the younger generations in the workforce, particularly younger millennials, Gen Zs, Gen Zs for any Americans listening, they have a different expectation from their leaders. They're not looking for a job for life, which is what I came into when I entered the workforce. They're going to jump ship every 2 years, and they're going to change. And if organizations want to retain talent for longer, they need a connection with those people. It's not about people. Millennials, Gen Zs don't want to be told what to do. They want leaders who are interested in their life beyond their role, who are going to help them nurture their career, support them, not withhold support because they don't want to lose them, but have an abundant mentality of being there for them. And if you create that connection with people who work with you and work for you, then you're going to get more buy-in from them and more engagement from them. So relationships for leaders, it's not just the external stakeholder relationships that come into play more and more the higher up the food chain you go, but it's the internal relationships that you need to build as well.
And for someone who perhaps building relationships doesn't come so naturally, what is your advice?
You may think building relationships doesn't come so naturally. Sometimes that's actually a misconception.
Okay.
Because we tend to look at extroverts as natural relationship builders. So the people who would typically, and I'm generalizing here, I recognize, but the people who would typically think that they are not a natural relationship builder would likely be more to the introvert side of that spectrum. And introverts are actually very good relationship builders because they listen
Right.
and they don't just think about themselves. They're not broadcasting the whole time, whereas a pure extrovert will be dominating the conversation, hogging the limelight. Those aren't relationship building skills. They're getting noticed skills, but they're not long-term relationship building skills. So I think if you think that you're not a natural relationship builder, you need to step back and say, well, what actually does it entail building relationships? And where I come from, where I started from is the networking skills place. How do you walk into a room full of people and be able to engage with them in a way with confidence and a way that was sustainable? But where I've moved to now is far more strategic. And those strategic skills help you build relationships because you're starting to think not just about what's in it for you, but that is important. You're there for professional development or professional progress after all, but also you're thinking about how you can help and support other people. And if you can do that strategically, you make more connections. You make more connections for others. You're going to build more relationships.
And that's very interesting because obviously a lot of people listening, they tend to work in L&D roles or HR roles. And they're often looking for challenges in the organization and understanding the issues or even the roots of the issues that they're perhaps causing significant problems in the organization. At what point does the lack of relationship building become a problem in an organization, and how does that manifest itself as a symptom, for example?
Take a step back first of all and talk about those specific roles because I find them very interesting. A lot of my clients are heads of learning and development, L&D managers, HR managers and leaders as well. And I'm not from an HR background, so this is an external perspective, having worked with HR leaders, having delivered talks at HR conferences as well. My perspective of that space is that there's been a shift where traditionally HR managers were seen as the policeman in the organization. So they found it very hard to build relationships because they were seen as the bad cop in that policeman scenario. So there was perhaps an unwillingness on both sides to cross a line and build relationships with colleagues. But if you want people to open up to you, to tell you what they want to achieve, to tell you how you can support them, you need trust. And trust comes from a strong relationship. So I think that has evolved over the years. And if you looked at HR now, it's much less the policeman and much more the partner. And you've got the HR business partner model that reflects that journey. But even if organizations aren't operating the business partner model, they're still going to be probably more partnership focused than they would have been 10 or 20 years ago, for example. Learning and development has less of that challenge because they are seen as more of a support role. But for an L&D manager, an L&D leader, your challenge is that your KPIs and the business's KPIs are different. And the sales director is going to be focused on short-term, potentially quarterly results. And learning, which is by its nature a long-term impact, is not going to be high on their priority list. So the stronger your relationships with the people that are spending the learning budget and considering how they, allowing their team members to engage in learning when they need them, on the factory floor, so to speak, your relationships with them is absolutely key. So that's the L&D HR role. If you're looking at organizations generally, I work with one client where the leadership team are high functioning, high performing, but very transactional. Focus comes from the discipline that they work in. In fact, this could describe a number of the teams that I've worked with in different sectors. But what they recognised was that the relationships were not strong enough for them, and that was having an impact internally and externally. But actually, whereas they're an externally focused organisation, the impact they were most worried about was internally, within the leadership team and with their teams and between their teams. And I think if you ask me, going back to your question, where are the biggest problems with relationships in an organisation? It's that between teams. So I hear from so many organizations of all sizes, not just large, the challenges of siloed thinking and the frustration that people have because they think that someone from another team will help them with their project because you work for the same company. But the challenge is that people have focused on their own agenda, what they need to do. And if their team's goals are not aligned to your team's goals, then they're not going to be interested unless you have a strong relationship with that individual. Then that shifts the dynamic.
There's more commitment.
Yeah. There's one of the simple things I share in my talks is that I think, generally speaking, there's three main reasons colleagues help each other. And I'm generalizing again. But the three reasons are because they're told to do so, because there's something in it for them, or because they like that person. The first two are intrinsic motivators. They're doing it for themselves. And once they've got the result they're looking for, they'll stop.
Yeah.
But when someone does something for you because they like you, it's extrinsic motivator. They're doing it because you'll succeed. And that takes the cap off of the amount of help they'll give you as well. So relationships internally are absolutely key to getting support across teams, across functions, across divisions.
And you touched on a very interesting point as well of trust, right? How do you identify that trust is a problem across the organization, or perhaps the lack of trust?
Yeah, how you identify it will come out sometimes in just conversation. You'll find out. As a leader, you might notice there is a reluctance on one team's part to support another team, and you should be able to pick that up in terms of how much cross thinking and cross support there is in the organisation. I worked with a bank where none of the other functions would support private banking because they felt let down in the past by them. So they wouldn't refer to private banking. There's a key KPI you can pick up on the amount of cross referrals there are within the organisation. And they wouldn't really engage with them or respond with them. And we had to rebuild those connections in the team, as part of the work that we did. So I think there are certain KPIs where you should be able to pick it up, and cross referrals is an obvious one. There's also just the conversations that are happening internally. The other thing you need to look at is what the reason for the trust is. So I talk about, or the breakdown of trust. I talk about the three key elements of trust, because we tend to see trust as amorphous. I trust you or I don't trust you. But actually, trust can be, in a professional sense, it can be individual trust. So does that person trust that other person? It can be product or service-based trust. So if it's internal, it would be, as with that private banking example, the other teams did not trust the service that private banking was offering their clients, and therefore they didn't feel able to support them. Or it can be brand trust. So in that case, it is private banking as a brand. So what you can do is break it down and say, where is our trust failing? And if you do that, you can say, okay, there's interpersonal trust in place and there's brand trust, but there's a problem with the service, and then you know what to address. So it's important to break it down and not just see trust as one amorphous mass.
It's very interesting your analogy to brands, because obviously, personally, I come from a marketing background. So you learn that trust and loyalty on a brand comes from delivering consistently against the promises that your brand makes, right?
Completely.
So if you open a bottle of a drink, you're going, you're going to be refreshed, right? You're going to enjoy. You're going to have a bit of energy. Is it the same for people, for relationships with people as well?
Completely. And you're making me think of a recent incident where I have a favourite pub in England. It's actually about 50, 60 miles from where I live. So I don't get there that often, but it's just off the M1 motorway. So if I'm on that motorway and I can time it, I'll go there. And I went there recently with a friend, and I always build it up to my friends. This is an amazing experience. The food is superb, and so on. I went there with a friend recently, and it didn't live up to that expectation. It's the old under promise and over deliver. The promise is really high now, so the delivery was poor, but it wasn't at the level I expected. Therefore, they fell below, and now I feel I don't want to go again. Which, just from one experience, is not fair on my part. And I think that translates absolutely equally to individual relationships, because if you have a good relationship with someone, then they let you down on something, you're going to think twice before working with them again. Now, the stronger the base is, then the more likely is you'll ride that. So I will go back to that pub because I've been going there for 20 years or more. So one bad experience, and well, again, it wasn't even bad, it just
Yeah.
wasn't at the level I expect. Just that one experience isn't going to put me off, but it just introduces a nagging doubt. So on a personal to personal level, the stronger the relationship, the more chance you've got to absolutely ride that. Now, talking about coming from a branding background, it's really interesting. I was working with a client of mine who had gone through a very public negative period. If I mentioned their brand name, A, you'd know them, and B, you'd know exactly what I was talking about. It was front page news for weeks. And I was running a program for one of the teams there, and I was talking about these three core elements of trust: the personal, the service, and the brand. And the leader of the team interjected, and he said, "How many people during this really public downtime, this period of really public scrutiny and,
Yeah.
and brand damage, had clients that you have a strong relationship with pick up the phone to you and ask, 'Are you okay?'" And a number of them put their hand up. So actually, when you have damaged brand trust, the individual personal trust can override it as well. And it was fascinating for me that those clients were reaching out to the individual. They weren't trying to avoid the brand because the brand was toxic for a few weeks. They weren't trying to avoid them. They were saying, "Are you all right? What can I do?"
Yes, very, very, very interesting. And you mentioned this program that you just developed for this organization. What does a typical program from you looks like when it comes to building trust or building relationships or strengthening
Yeah.
relationships or even assessing the challenges that the organization has? So how do you work and how do you collaborate with organizations?
It would depend what the key focus is and what the objective to achieve is. But if we took my core work, my core program on professional relationship strategy, I split it into three areas. So the first thing I do before I get into those three areas is I make the case for professional relationships being taken seriously rather than being an afterthought, because everyone knows they're important, but we just think we're good at them naturally, and I'll know who I need to think about. So I will introduce certain concepts that reinforce that actually it pays you to think strategically about this. And then once we've got that battle won, I look at them from in three stages. You need to build the right relationships so that you have a network of relationships with people who are in a position to help you. So the key thing around that is getting the balance right. So creating what I call a blended mindset. So you're not too transactional focused. I am only looking to meet people who are going to help me with this objective, and I'm going to ignore everyone else. And you're not too relationship minded. So I don't really care how people can help me. I just like people and I want to connect. But you do bring an agenda to it, but at the same time, no one feels networked by you, and you're totally authentic and human at the point of interaction.
Yeah.
And then once you've overcome that obstacle, you can say, how can people help me? So I have a model of the four eyes. The four eyes are where people can help you achieve a specific objective. So you have people who can be influencers. They're the people talking about you when you're not in the room. You have people who are introducers. So they're opening doors for you where you need to meet the right people. You have people who are implementers. They're at the coal face. They might not be the people you look at with stars in your eyes and say, I must connect with them, but they have massive impact on what you're trying to
Yeah.
succeed.
Yeah.
And you have sources of information, insight, and ideas. And they're the people that support you. Mentoring comes into that as well, but also give you key intelligence. So that's building professional relationships. Once you've built them, you need to nurture them. So you go from having that network of people in a position to help you to having them want to help you. And we look at the 7 stages of professional relationship, moving our mindset away from a binary focus of you're in my network or you're not, to understanding the journey people go on, and how do I get people from recognizing me to becoming supporters and advocates, where they really want to make a difference for me. And that becomes a very practical part of how you build relationships and how you move people through that journey. Trust is a key part of that.
Yeah.
And another key part of that is curiosity and the power of curiosity, because on my own podcast, that comes up time and time again.
Right.
So I've created what I call the curiosity cycle for conversation, looking at how a curious approach to conversation develops deeper trust and engagement. And then, so we've had building and nurturing, we then go to leveraging. So helping people understand how to help you. So we look at what stops us from asking for help, how we make it easy for people to help us. And I have a tool called the relationship matrix that brings all of these things together. And if you use that, you can look at under a specific objective, you map out your network, and you can see who could help you, and you can see how they can help you and would help you, and you can say, are they giving me the help I need? You can see who could help you, but maybe they're not quite ready to. So you can say, what do I need to do to build the relationship? And you can see who could help you, but you don't know them yet, and you can seek who introduces you. So that's all under the leverage as well. So that would be the core program. But then what I would do is brief with the client and find out what their specific challenges around those areas are. And then we would introduce certain ideas and take some out depending on specifically where that client is at.
Very, very interesting. And love the idea of the 4 eyes. Very clear. But now you mentioned something that I wanted to dig a little bit deeper, the 7 stages of building relationships. Help me out here then. We never met before. I mean, we've been perhaps on email conversations together. We've exchanged a few things. You've been on programs with Headspring, but this is the first time we're meeting. If I feel, okay, Andy is someone that I want to maintain in my network, how do I go about it?
Well, so let's go through the 7 stages first,
Okay.
if that's useful. So before today, if you met me at a meeting, we're in the same place or at a conference, you'd probably have name recognition because of the emails and the programs.
Exactly.
So you would recognize me, which is stage 1. Now, after today, we've spoken, you understand more about what I do, you know me, stage 2. And hopefully we've created a bit of rapport so you like me. If you're getting feedback from your colleagues on the success of the programs that we've run, you may well trust me. So we now move to level 4. Level 5 and 6 is supporter and advocate. So a supporter is somewhere where if I needed your help, I could phone you, ask for your help, and you'd be happy to give it. An advocate, I wouldn't have to phone you. If you're in a meeting and someone says, we really need to look at our professional relationships, you'd be going, oh, I know who you need to talk to. That's advocacy. And then you go into friendship is level 7, which isn't specifically what we're looking for, but it's nice when it happens, when it's appropriate. With some of my clients, we have to take that off the list because not appropriate. The first thing is you always look at it from the other person's perspective. So I've said where I'm at from your perspective, and it would be or where you're at from my perspective, but it's how the other person views you, because if you want their help, that's the important thing. In answer to your question, what would you do? You'd follow up, first of all, personally. So great tip that I heard many, many years ago, never quite managed to drill down to the original source of it, is 24/7/30. You'd follow up within 24 hours. Little note, Andy, it was great to meet you in person yesterday. I love what you said about the 4 eyes or the 7 stages. So personalizing it and so on. Then after 7 days, you would follow up again. You might send a personalized LinkedIn connection request. And then after 30 days, Andy, should we grab a coffee? I've got a few things I want to run past you. Or have you got time for a quick Zoom or Teams meeting? So that way you're building a wall around the outside. And suddenly we go from, hey, we've had a really good conversation for the podcast. We've met in person, but then if we don't speak again for the next year, I vaguely remember that person that we met, we had in on the podcast. Who was the professional relationships guy? Which, So you want to build a wall around the outside so people stay in. And you're starting the journey towards that sweet spot of supporter, advocate, and friend. The next thing you're looking at is when is it appropriate to spend time with people and follow up in more depth. And the other thing to bear in mind is people struggle to manage networks with the time we have available.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you look at the people who are at the first couple of stages, I'm going to exclude friendship from here.
Yeah.
But if you look at the people who are recognise and know, if you were suddenly reaching out to me every week and saying, let's go for lunch, let's go for a coffee, it's a little bit quick. It's a little bit needy, perhaps. It's a little bit strange, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Sometimes you find that instant rapport and that happens naturally. But typically you would connect on LinkedIn, comment on a few posts, little things like that, just to stay insight in mind.
Yeah.
And then gradually build the relationship from there. So you'd connect on LinkedIn and click the alarm bell on the profile so that you get updates every time I post it, so that you know consciously you can go and comment, not stalk, but thoughtfully comment on posts.
In a healthy way, I guess.
Exactly. So you wouldn't invest a huge amount of time with those ones and twos. Equally, you wouldn't purposefully need to invest a huge amount of time on your fives and sixes, supporters and advocates, because by the nature of the relationship, they're there. I can go 10 years without seeing some people, and you just pick up where you left off.
Yeah.
And I know if I picked up the phone to certain people I haven't seen for years and said, hey, can I pick your brains on something? Would you help me with something? They'd say, absolutely. It happens.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting you go 10 years without seeing people, but you don't have to invest the time. So where you'd invest the time is when you get people to like and trust, because it's now natural for you to say, hey, let's go for a coffee, or let's have a Zoom, let's catch up, we haven't spoken for a while. And they're at a place where they're showing potential to become supporters and advocates. You just need to invest more time with them. So that's the other thing you would do. So in answer to your question, you would connect 24/7, 30, start the conversation going, engage with a consistency that creates momentum until the point where you feel that the relationship is at like and trust. And then you say, let's go for lunch. Let's start to have that transactional conversation about how we can help and support each other.
24/7, 30. I like that. I'm going to try that. You mentioned social media and also using social media to engage with people, to stay in that kind of on the radar, I guess, right? Nowadays, with AI and things like that, things are becoming a lot less personal. I notice, a lot of the comments that you get on social media are AI generated, people just wanting to sound clever, or what kind of things should we be looking into when it comes to this whole online world for relationship building?
Well, remember that it is a social network, and it is person to person. Just as you talk about the horror of using AI to craft comments, I've always felt strongly that management of your LinkedIn connection should not be delegated, and I know it when it is. It's really intuitively where you know someone from, what you know about them, and how you engage with them. I don't think, however good your EA or PA is, or the people you outsource it to, that they can recognise that. And I've seen people fall flat and look bad because they've outsourced social media. It should be personal. I don't fully buy, I understand, but I don't fully buy the argument that people don't have time. I know a very busy CEO who once or twice a week will go into a cafe at 7:00 and he will write a couple of posts on LinkedIn, or he'll engage with people, or whatever it might be. So he'll use that time productively, or he spends it reading a business book he wants to read. So he has that dedicated time that is set for that. You set time aside in your diary and you work out what works for you. For me, I have the 10-minute rule. If I'm waiting in a reception, as I waited for you for a few minutes this afternoon, I'll get out LinkedIn, see what's on there, just comment or post on something. So my 10-minute rule on LinkedIn, while you're waiting for a meeting, just go onto LinkedIn on your phone, pick 3 posts from your news feed, scroll through, because otherwise you're telling the algorithm it's the same people all the time. Scroll through, pick 3 people, like, comment or share. It doesn't take long to do that. And if you did that every day, 10 minutes a day, your engagement on LinkedIn would be substantially higher than most people in your sector for most sectors. So there's little steps like that can make a difference. Using AI, I'm a big fan of AI. I use AI a lot, but I use it thoughtfully, and I use it in a way that it's still an engagement with me at the end of the day. So I use it to prompt ideas.
Yeah.
I've never used it to answer a post on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is a bit extreme. But I might use it for ideas for a post on LinkedIn. I might use it to bring my ideas together. I'll take podcast interviews and I will upload them to Cast Magic, which is an AI platform, and I'll say, I have a monthly blog for Psychology Today. I'll say, what would Psychology Today readers be interested in from this interview?
Interesting.
And it will give me some titles, and I can work through that. And I might say, pull out from the interview 5 or 6 quotes that would fit that, and then I can then thread them into the piece.
Right.
So it saves me a lot of the legwork there,
Yeah,
but it's still me writing, and it's still me interpreting.
Yeah.
And I think it's about where that line is really important. So it's a really useful tool for me as a summary tool, as a content comprehension tool, if you like. Should have used AI to find the right word there. But it's a tool to help you deliver what is yours rather than to replicate it and replace it with something else.
This is fascinating, and I mean, I wanted to ask a few more questions, but I know we're short for time. But I'm gonna try.
Go for it.
First, mistakes. Right. Personally, I don't see myself. I'm fine, with networking, meeting new people, but I'm not the guy who maintains the relationship. I'm not very, I feel like sometimes people don't want to be bothered, or be disturbed, right? So, is this a mistake when it comes to relationship building? And what should I be doing more? I mean, you mentioned the 24, the 7, and the 30 rule. But what else? What kind of mistakes do people commonly make when it comes to building strong relationships?
Well, the number one mistake you've said, and that's not following up. And actually, if I've met you at a conference and we've had an engaging conversation and we've invested some time in it and we've identified ways we can work together and we've exchanged business cards and we've said we'll follow up, why on earth wouldn't you? And actually, and don't take this personally, this is for everyone who doesn't follow up. You have disrespected the time that someone else has invested in you.
Yeah.
And you've cost them that time they could have spent with someone else who would have followed up. So it is actually, to me, disrespectful not to. Now, that doesn't mean you follow up every conversation, because not every conversation is going to be one that's going to, you never know where these conversations can lead, but you're going to pick the ones where you've either had a real rapport or there's something clearly in common. That's time management, because we can't follow up with everyone we meet in every occasion. I understand that. But if you make the promise, implicit or explicit, to follow up, then you should do so. The second part of your reason for not doing so is imposter syndrome at work. But if you've had a good conversation with someone and they've come to that event to meet people and have conversations, why would you be bothering them? And I want you to think about when someone followed up with you and they showed an interest in you. Now, here's the difference. If you follow up and you're saying, hi, I'm Tiago, remember we spoke, I'm from Headspring, and this is what we do, and here's our latest brochure, and when can we get you to book a course, then that might not be the ideal follow-up. But if you follow up and say, hey, remember that conversation we had at the conference? I found it really interesting. I've got a couple of questions about it. Do you fancy a quick Zoom? Or you followed up by connecting on LinkedIn. Hey, it was really great to meet you at that conference. And then the next 5 times I post, you're commenting on 2 of them really thoughtfully. Why would, if someone was doing that for you, would you see them as a burden?
No, absolutely not. Yeah,
you'd be flattered. Dale Carnegie said the sweetest sound to any man is the sound of his own name. Show an interest in people, and 80% of your outreach should be about the other person, not about you. I talk about the I test. Look at your communication and see how many times you say I in it rather than you. And switch it around. I had someone sent me a LinkedIn message with 17 I's and no U's in it. They didn't hear back from me again, because it tells me where they're at.
Right.
So you're not going to be a burden if you are sincerely, authentically showing an interest in people. Avoiding using the word flattery, because that sounds inauthentic. It's effectively what you're doing, but you're doing it authentically. So follow-up is absolutely key. The second biggest mistake, I would say, is not having any idea why you're doing this. So building relationships, networking without any strategy. Now, it is okay to connect with people and build relationships with people because you have things in common and you like them. You don't have to have a purpose for every individual from every conversation.
Yeah.
That would not look good and your network would shrink. But ultimately, when you are trying to achieve that success you asked me about in the first question, and you talked about going further with the help of other people, your strategy is to look at your network and say, okay, who can help me and how can they help me? Our four eyes. And the mistake people make is they don't think like that. We don't think like that. We just try and plow on until someone offers help. But people are busy with their own stuff. So we need to be sitting there and saying, what am I trying to achieve? Who do I know who could help me? And that's where the process I talked about, the relationship matrix that we've developed, helps you to think that through and plot that through. So that lack of clarity of objective, that lack of strategic thinking means that your network is populated with blind spots.
Right.
In other words, you have people who could help you and would help you, but you're not asking them. Or there is someone you need in your network and you're not asking for an introduction to them. So you need to stop, take stock, and sit and understand who you know, who you don't know, who you need to know, and what you need to ask for whom, from whom.
Yeah. And if you are in organizational development role, for example, what are the things that you can do to encourage more of these relationship building inside the organization and building trust? And are there good practices, good, little tips, little things that you can do, or big things, or do you need like a big strategy for relationship building?
I always think it's good to have a strategy. I don't
Right.
think it has to be a big, heavy, huge investment strategy.
Yeah.
It's just a question of actually stopping and thinking, what do we want to achieve and how well are we networked together? There's a number of different things you can do. At a very simple level, when I was in my early 20s, I worked for the civil service.
Right.
And I'd never heard of networking at this point, by the way. Wednesday morning, so I was in a public-facing part of the civil service, and we had a late opening on a Wednesday so we could have team meetings. And we used to meet in our teams and just talk about what we're trying to achieve, where we're trying to go, and so on. And I can't remember how it came about. And I smile at it when I think back now, given what I do, but both in terms of networking and in terms of speaking in public. But I volunteered to go to other teams' meetings to tell them what we were trying to do and understand from them where they were at, and started to introduce that. So just little things like that can make a difference. Shadowing, so getting teams to shadow each other to understand what they're trying to achieve. When you're looking at training interventions, look at training interventions where you consciously bring people from different teams together into mentoring groups. It's one of the key things I do in my program. So the bank that I talked about with the private banking challenge, we created mentoring groups of 3 people, and in every group there was someone from private banking. The focus of the mentoring was referral strategy. It wasn't about silos, but it was a byproduct of making sure they built relationships in those mentoring triads over a period of time, that they started to rebuild those relationships and the trust between private banking and the rest of the bank. Taking it to a higher degree, there's various exercises we run. So, for example, asking senior leaders to map out all of the relationships within their team and start to map out where the trust lies, where there's strong trust, where there's weak trust, and then start to identify what it is, identifying influences in certain teams. There's certain mapping techniques you can use to start to identify strong points, weak points, areas of focus, and so forth. But a lot of this is just comes from having clarity of this is what we need to do. I've mentioned the relationship matrix a couple of times. We're talking to one large organization where they have no CRM. They have no way of mapping their knowledge networks internally.
Oh, wow.
And my client said to me, I've been here 7 years. If I left tomorrow, no one would know who I know.
Wow.
So we're looking at using the relationship matrix as a way for them to map knowledge networks internally. And so it is about knowing, who do I turn to for this? Who do I turn to for that? And it helps to have the ability to map that, both for responding in the moment, but also for succession planning.
You just mentioned mentoring, and you just published the book, The Financial Times Guide to Mentoring. First, what are the key takeaways from that book? Why did you write this book, and why is mentoring an important skill or asset that you have as
Yeah.
an organization?
Well, let's take those in reverse order. So, why is mentoring so important? You take your first question about going further with the help of other people. Part of that is their expertise and experience. And the more you can learn from where other people have trodden, then the better equipped you are to face the challenges ahead of you. And I should stress here that this isn't just about what we call in the book traditional hierarchical mentoring,
Hmm.
where you've got the senior executive mentoring the young person. You've got reverse mentoring is
Yeah.
increasingly popular now. So when I talk about someone who has the experience or expertise, that could be a digital native who better understands AI and social media platforms than a senior executive
Hmm.
who is Gen X or a boomer. So, reverse mentoring or peer-to-peer mentoring can be just as powerful, but it's the help and the support, the accountability, the shoulder to cry on, all of these different things that another person can give you on that
Hmm.
journey, or a team of people. Because one of the things we talk about in the book is not necessarily having one formal mentor, but having a team of mentors. Some may be formal relationships, others may be people you can just pick up the phone to, but you know you can,
Hmm.
and you can ask for their help or check in every now and then. And I have both in my life. So the key takeaways from the book, we structure it into three key areas. So the primary focus is how do you become a better mentor? And I can partly answer the first question about why we wrote it with this, because both Ruth and I have a lot of experience of providing mentoring support, mentoring training, and being mentors ourselves over a number of years. What we've both witnessed over a number of years is organisations ask for training for mentees, but not provide the same support for mentors. And I think
Right.
there's an assumption at play here. And it goes back to the traditional hierarchical model of mentoring, where your mentors are senior
Yeah.
executives. We assume that because they are senior and accomplished, that they know how to mentor, but they're not the same thing. Where
It's a
they have
skill.
excelled,
Yeah.
that's not the skill that they've
Yeah.
necessarily
Yeah.
excelled in. So we wanted to write something that was definitive for mentors.
Right.
So that's the main chunk of the book. We've then got a few chapters focused on mentees where it's not already been covered for mentors,
Hmm.
because there's a lot of, when you're looking at the objective setting and the agenda for a mentoring meeting, that's useful for both parties. We didn't replicate everything in the book, we
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
repeat it. And then the third section is for organizations. And again, this goes to why we wrote the book, because again, in our experience, Ruth and myself, and Ruth's in the US, so we're looking at different
Oh.
markets, and
Hmm.
I've taught mentoring in Asia as well. So between us, we've covered,
Yeah.
a fair part of the globe in looking at mentoring programs. Most mentoring programs we've become aware of are failures on one level or another. And the most common level is most people don't know about them, or they don't
Yeah.
know they
Yeah.
qualify for them, or they don't know how to access them. And I've seen that so many times when I've gone into organizations and said, how many of you have a mentor? How many of you know about your mentoring program? So we wanted to help HR leaders, L&D leaders, ERG volunteers who are responsible for mentoring programs put something in place that was better equipped to create something that's sustainable and that would work. So takeaways from the book will focus takeaways for mentors. How do you set objectives? How do you hold your mentee accountable? How do you run a meeting? How do you overcome imposter syndrome? How do you work with neurodivergent mentees?
Hmm.
We've tried to be really comprehensive with this. For the mentee, how do you exit a mentoring relationship that's not working?
Yeah.
How do you avoid your mentor becoming your tormentor, which is one of my favorite phrases of Ruth's? And for organizations, how do you match mentor mentee effectively? How do you measure the ROI of a program? Things like that.
Fascinating, fascinating. And Andy, I think we're coming to the end of the podcast of the conversation. What is the best way to connect with you? Following the spirit of networking, what is the best way to make sure you get a follow up from you?
Absolutely. Well, the beauty of having a name like mine is if you can spell it, you can find me.
Mm.
But obviously, I'm on LinkedIn. What I would ask is if you connect on LinkedIn to personalize the approach and tell me that you listened to this podcast, because that makes a big difference. I'm not an open network in the sense of I'll connect with absolute strangers, but
Right.
if people give me a good reason to connect, then I'm happy to. I want to enrich both of our networks, but I want to do it in a meaningful way. My business strapline is connecting is not enough. My website is andylopata.com, Lopata. And then I would encourage you to go there and on the homepage, subscribe to my newsletter. And it just gives you a monthly reminder of that you should be doing this stuff, as well as hopefully some useful tips. And the podcast is Connected Leadership, the Connected Leadership podcast on all the normal streams. You can find it in most places. And then I'm on YouTube, all the sites. I'm pretty much everywhere. And of course, Amazon and all the other sites for the book.
Excellent. And for those listening, if you like to connect with Headspring as well, our website is headspringexecutive.com. And I think this is it. I've been Tiago Kivi. My guest has been Andy Lopata. So thank you, Andy. And see you next time.
Thank you.